Hello, everyone. I'm going to get us started. My name is Sala Gali. I'm Director of Development for the College of Engineering. I'm going to introduce our speaker. Jari is an engineer by training and an entrepreneur by nature with over 20 years of bringing innovative solutions to markets such as Bluetooth, USB, RFID, and semiconductor and DNA sequencing. It says semiconductor DNA sequencing. Is that actually
that's correct.
wow.
Company
Okay.
called Ion Torrent. First ever DNA sequencing on a semiconductor chip.
Wow, I thought I was reading that wrong.
We even were going to go sequence DNA on Mars.
Well, there's still opportunity, I guess. I don't think anyone else has done that yet. He's formed or been a part of 6 startups in various management roles. He holds an MBA in technology management from UOP, and he has his bachelor's from San Jose State in EE. He is also inventor or co-inventor on over 10 patents and has published 4 books: The Entrepreneur Ethos, Frustration-Free Technology Management, #Endurance Tweet, A Little Nudge to Keep You Going, and Business Basics for Entrepreneurs. So please give him a big round of applause as he comes up here.
Thank you. Wow, appreciate that. Yeah, so thanks a lot. I graduated in 1995, so it's almost been 25 years. When I first got here, this building was actually brand new. And then 25 years before that, so it's almost 50 years, my dad graduated from here in engineering, EE, so it's in the family. Electrical engineers are the best in the world. And at that point, that student center, they just redid the student center. That old student center was brand new. So we have a long history in the Bolander family being at San Jose State. My brother went here as well, but he went in like public administration, which we won't talk about. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about how not to be a jerk in Silicon Valley or anywhere in the world. And it's actually pretty apropos that we talk about this today. I wrote this book called The Entrepreneur Ethos, and it's sort of my take on how to build a more ethical, inclusive, and resilient entrepreneur community. And as engineers, all you guys are engineers, students, right? Okay, great. As engineers, if you're going to build anything in the world, or if you want to be entrepreneurial, chances are your founding team will have the business guy or gal and then the engineering technical person. And those are all you guys. And so you should understand a little bit, 1, about entrepreneurship, and 2, about how to be more inclusive and ethical. So we'll get started on that. So one thing, just want to let you guys know, you probably noticed I got this big gash on my nose. I'm not going to tell you how I got that because we all know there's only one rule in Fight Club, and that is we don't talk about Fight Club. And I'm not sure who I am, if I'm Brad Pitt or Edward Norton. He's got better abs, and I'm a little more nerdy like him, so I'm probably Ed, more like Ed. So as the introduction mentioned, I'm Jari. I've written Entrepreneur Ethos. I've actually written 6 books now, so that's I like to write books. I know it's weird for an engineering guy to like to write books. I've also been at 500 startups and Launchpad Digital Health, which are accelerators for startups. And I blog on the Daily MBA. And I've also formed a nonprofit that's based on my late wife's work. She passed away last year from leukemia in the PR and marketing space. And this is actually her book that we published in her honor this past year to sort of talk about how PR affects the world. So even though I talk about entrepreneurship, it's all kind of related to the messaging and the storytelling. And that's the reason why I like to talk about this stuff. So I know a lot about startups, entrepreneurs, and stuff like that, so I can enlighten you on that. But there's one thing I don't know a lot about, and that's how not to get cut on my face. So protecting your head, not good at that. So if you do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu like I do, don't ask me how to not get cut on your head, because that's how I got this on Tuesday. So sometimes you got to get a little rough and tumble. So we're going to talk a little bit about internal mindset. We're going to talk about what it's like to be an entrepreneur. We're going to talk about good examples and bad examples of entrepreneurs. But one of the things that I really want you guys to realize is that there's a lot of conflict in the world right now. We'll talk a little bit about what the significance of actually today is, and I'll get to that in a second. But I really love this John Wooden quote because this is what I'm talking about. When it comes to ethics and ethos and being a better person and being a better entrepreneur, this is one of the best quotes on that. And the reason is because whoever you are at home You should be what you should be in the world. You should be consistently one person. Lots of people say, well, in business, I'm a real hard ass, but in my personal life, I love my family. Well, that's a pretty massive conflict. And chances are you're going to be unethical if you do that. There's actually studies that have shown that that's the case. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the people that I feel are like really inspirational. Does anyone know who this guy is? He's like your age. Yeah, it's Boilan Salt. Yeah, Boilan. Do you know what he's trying to do? Since you guys don't know him. He's your age, by the way. Came up with this idea when he was 17. Does anyone know what the Great Pacific Garbage Patch is? Everyone raise their hand. Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Okay. So this guy, when he was 17, figured out, you know what? We have a problem with plastics in the oceans. Killing fish. That's bad, right? Every one of the experts in the world, PhD, like from every great university is like, it's going to take us 25 years to fix this in billions and billions and billions of dollars. It's just not going to happen. So this guy, at 17, he's from Holland. He's like, oh no, we can figure it out. So he built a machine that's going to collect all of the plastic in the Great Garbage Patch and clean it up, probably half the size, in 5 years. And he's going to do it for way less than anyone thought. So when they asked him, well, why are you doing this? And he's like, well, someone has to. But he's very entrepreneur about it. So you think, well, how do you make money on something like that? Well, what he decided to do is the plastic they're going to collect, they're going to make products. And those products you can buy. And of course, they'll be at a premium. But how cool would it be that you have a pair of sunglasses from the Great Garbage Patch? Maybe you might not want that, but maybe other people will. So in terms of when we talk about ethics and the ethos of our community as entrepreneurs, these are some of the ones that are at the top. Has anyone ever eaten an In-N-Out burger? Raise your hand. All right, cool. So you know what I'm talking about. This is the CEO. And on, you guys what know Glassdoor? You've heard of Glassdoor, where you can look up like how cool people are? Well, she is ranked consistently among one of the top CEOs on Glassdoor. Can you imagine a non-tech CEO ranked high on Glassdoor? I mean, they make burgers, right? But the thing that's really important about what she does is she does something called servant leadership. She's not in it for herself, she's in it for the people that she works with. And her job as a manager and as a leader is to make other people successful. And if there's one thing that you remember today, your job as a leader is to make others successful, not yourself. And that's a really hard thing for people to grasp. But she's, again, consistently been on the top of that. This is Justin from Sprout Social in 2017. He was the #1 CEO on Glassdoor. His company is in Chicago, and they do a bunch of social media stuff. But the thing that's really interesting about him, again, another good example of someone that's trying to live an ethos that raises everyone up, is that he is very engaged and collaborative with his people. A lot of times, especially in engineering, I'm just going to warn you guys, when you get to the engineering workforce, most of your managers will suck so bad that you're like, you can't even manage your way out of a paper bag. It's the whole reason why I wrote Frustration-Free Technical Management. It's like, they're not people. Most of the time, engineers self-select into something where we can stay in a dark room and code like mad, right? I mean, that's what I did, and now I'm up and talking in front of you guys, which is still, to me, to this day, one of the scariest things I've ever had to do. But what he does, which is really powerful, is that he's engaged and collaborative with his employees. Again, it's important that you know what's going on. And we'll give you some examples of CEOs and leaders that actually didn't know what's going on and got them in trouble. Those are the jerks we'll talk about in a second. Does anyone know who this is? You guys heard of him? Ray Dalio. He runs the most successful hedge fund, I think, in human history. You would like this guy, and the reason why you'd like this guy is he takes a very quantitative approach to transparency in what he does. So instead of, hey, I don't know if didn't you guys have jobs or part-time jobs where you've worked in a company, right? When the boss is there and you want to contradict a boss, how hard it is to contradict a boss? I mean, it's like, oh, I don't really want to. That's a career-limiting move, That's above my pay grade. What he did, he built software that everyone in a meeting can score an idea. And they can score an idea and then it aggregates it so that they know what the best ideas are, independent of who says them. And so this has allowed him to build the biggest hedge fund in human history. And he also wrote a book called Principles, which is actually a reasonably good book to read. It's a little, well, the beginning's a little crusty, but it gets better after that. So these are examples of what I think of as the top of the entrepreneur world, the non-jerks in the world, the kind of people that I actually want to emulate. And a lot of times, you guys are young students in engineering, you're like, need mentors and people to look up to. And a lot of times we look up to the people in the news, like the Facebooks and the Twitter CEO and the Uber CEO and all those kind of people. And you see them in the news, and we'll talk about that in a second. And you're like, where are the people that are acting more ethical and have a higher ethos for our community? And it is important because there's a lot of things that we need to solve in our community. So since I also do a little bit of PR, I love cartoons because cartoons allow upper management to understand concepts because most of the time they don't get it. So this one's one of my favorites. It's by a guy named Tom Fishburne. And if you ever want really cool cartoons about marketing and branding and stuff, he's awesome. But this just resonates so true. This is our somewhat jerky CEO, and this is his entire team. And he's like, hey, how can we make this unmitigated disaster I'm about to tell you into like, no big deal, right? If you're ever in this situation, you failed. You need to figure out how to get out of this situation extremely quickly because this is the kind of jerks that you don't want to be with or be about. And we'll get to some of those right now. Does anyone know who this is? Raise your hand if you know who this is. Do you know what happened to him? He got booted out, right? Now, do you think that he was unfairly booted out? It's a trick question. So this is Travis. If I can pick one modern example of a CEO that's a jerk, it's this guy. And I don't say that very lightly because I know a lot of people are, maybe he's misunderstood. When you're on video chastising an Uber driver and yelling at them, saying all sorts of wacky things, I mean, I can't defend you. Even if I was his PR guy, I'd be like, yeah, just quit. But one of the things that I wanted to bring up about this is that there was a catalytic point for Uber's demise. And that was, do you ever remember back in, I think it was 2016, 2017, I think it was 2017, when they had the huge immigration, like they were going to throw all the immigrants out, like the Trump administration's like, all these, we're going to throw them all out. And they staged a protest at New York airports. Remember that? The cab drivers and everyone said, we are not going to pick anyone up at the airport. Done. We're in solidarity, right? Uber picked people up anyway. And within that one weekend, 200,000 people deleted Uber. They lost 10% of their market cap, from 10 billion down to 9 billion. Now, his response was the jerkiest move of all because he didn't take responsibility for doing something stupid. Which, look, solidarity is solidarity, right? Even Lyft, who, if you guys know Lyft, they did the complete opposite. What did they do? They honored the ban and donated $1 million to the ACLU. Uber actually donated $3 million to the ACLU after the fact to try to save, and it didn't work. Now, you'd say, it's just one thing, man, it's just one thing. Do you know what else Uber is famous for? Their misogyny towards women engineers. And there was a famous Medium post from a woman engineer at Uber who basically detailed out the absolute travesty of what was going on within their engineering group, and that just was that was a year before this. And so every time you get a ding against yourself. Why? Because you're being a jerk. And people say, well, they're moving fast and breaking things, and sometimes you got to ruffle little feathers. That's not the same. It's not the same in being pathological, systematic, a-hole. Hands down, not the way to go. And so What's the lesson here? Delete Uber, of course. unless they're a donor, then I'm kidding. That's another thing. Does anyone know who this is? Oh, yeah. Theranos, our colleague in the bioengineering department, knows who this is. This is Elizabeth Holmes. Now, a fun fact about Elizabeth Holmes is that her great-great-grandfather invented Fleischmann's yeast. Bet you didn't know that. So she is from the Fleischmann yeast fortune. And if anyone's ever baked bread, y'all are millennial. Well, I don't even, what's not even millennial anymore. If you all baked bread, you've used Fleischmann's yeast. So Elizabeth here in 2017 or 2016 was the fastest self-made woman billionaire in the world. And then the next year, she was worth 0 because of Theranos, which is the company that she founded and raised, I don't know, 500 to $1 billion, some ridiculous amount of money. Yeah, $800 million for technology that blatantly, flagrantly was bullshit. And I actually have friends that used to work there, and they're like, this shit's never gonna work. And I mean, I'm in the labs business. Like my company, Lab Central Solutions, we're in the digital health for clinical laboratories. I talk to all these PhD, MD clinical guys all the time. And I'm like, oh, hey, what about Theranos? And they just shake their head and they go, yeah, complete rubbish. So if you were to go hear her speak, which there's a lot of people that actually would pay money to go see her speak, her big thing was no plan B. Should never have a plan B. Should have plan A, burn the boats, and jam until you can't jam anymore. Well, that's a pretty jerkish move because I can tell you from experience that you're going to need a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, a plan D, a plan E, a plan F. The only question is when do you switch to which plan? So the other thing in July of this year is her and her COO got indicted. 9 counts of fraud, wire fraud and all sorts of things, and Theranos went out of business. So imagine you go from the pinnacle of, she was Forbes Woman of the Year. She was on the cover of Forbes. Like, we all need to be more like Elizabeth Holmes. Look, finally a female entrepreneur is a billionaire. From there to, I'm indicted. I'm going to be thrown in jail. I have told lies. It is never worth that. And no matter what anyone says, the ends do not justify the means, ever. Now, you may say, oh, well, I'm just going to do that and make a bunch of money and then retire. Well, yeah, you may want to do that, but how do you want to sleep at night? How do you want to be remembered? People know. The people at Theranos, 5 years before this blew up, knew this wasn't going to work. Now, you could say, why didn't they say something? Well, maybe they should have. But I'm saying is it comes back and haunts you. And so, yeah, she's kind of a jerk. So, does anyone know who this is? Has anyone heard of the PayPal Mafia? You've never heard of the PayPal Mafia? Has anyone heard of Elon Musk? Raise your hand. Okay. Elon Musk is part of the PayPal Mafia. Dave McClure is part of the PayPal Mafia. What's the PayPal Mafia? They're all the guys that invested in PayPal, made like billions of dollars, right? Like ridiculous. Dave was the founder of 500 startups. My company, Lab Central Solutions, was part of Batch 14 Accelerator, 500 startups. I got to meet Dave. He told me my idea was full of shit. I'm like, well, you already invested, so ha. But I looked up to Dave. The reason why I looked up to Dave is because what Dave would say is like, look, we need to have more women and minority entrepreneurs, and I'm going to invest in them. And I'm not being altruistic, I am being selfish. And I'm like, whoa, selfish. Because there's untapped potential in minority and women entrepreneurs, and I am going to throw money at it because I'm going to make a ton of money. No one else figures that out. I'm like, wow, that's really cool. That's exactly what I talk about in the entrepreneur ethos. That's exactly what my late wife Jane would talk about. So you've got what you say in public and what you do in private. So Dave is no longer with 500 startups because he would sexually harass women entrepreneurs. And they kicked him out. Now, that is bad, right? what you say in public is what you should mean in private. Again, public and private should be, you shouldn't show up with two different people. You shouldn't be bipolar. You shouldn't be Jekyll and Hyde. You shouldn't be, Brad Pitt and Ed Norton. You shouldn't be Tyler and in fact, they don't even tell you who Ed Norton's character is in Fight Club. You got to be one person. Because if you don't show up as one person and you're not consistent throughout your life, you will, one, end up being more of a jerk, and two, you'll be unethical. And that's been proven. So actually, I really looked up to him, and it was really disappointing that he let not only me down, but the rest of our community down. Set back 500 startups a lot. And something that I'm still proud that I was part of 500 startups, because what was really great about it was that inclusion, but it's one of those marks you just sometimes can't get rid of. Does anyone know who this is? He's my favorite. The reason why he's my favorite is because, do you remember when Mark Zuckerberg went in front of Congress for the whole Cambridge Analytica thing? Wore a suit, got rid of the, Did you see his demeanor? His demeanor is very respectful, okay? You may not agree with the senators that are around you, but there's just one thing that you have to always remember, is that you have to have respect for the institution. This guy would laugh and giggle and do the stupidest stuff. The thing that's great about him and his demise is that he didn't get caught for what he originally did. So what he originally did was he took a drug for AIDS patients and he jacked it up 10,000, 15,000%. So that now life-saving drugs for people they couldn't afford. There's the same with the EpiPen people, the Mylan people, which she's in my backup deck, but I haven't put her in because these ones rise to the top. You can rise to the top of being the biggest jerk on the planet. So he didn't get caught for the original thing that they were investigating him on, and this is why this is important. So anytime the government investigates you, they hardly ever get you for what they originally sought. It's when they pull the thread, they get all the other shady stuff that he did. So he got 7 years for securities fraud because he was moving money from his different companies. They also took away his vintage Wu-Tang record that he paid $1 million for, which, I can't believe he's a Wu-Tang Clan fan, because I like the Wu-Tang Clan, and it's just, anyway. I guess we are different people. We're not just one thing, we're all a multi-thing, so I can respect him for liking the Wu-Tang Clan, but don't be the farmer bro. He's going to be in federal prison for a long time. So now, we've seen the good and seen the bad, and the significance of today was really interesting. Does anyone know what today is? Sorry? Other than November 1st, 2018. I know it's midterms. I really appreciate you guys being here. For not cramming for exams, because I remember when I was during midterms, I would cram a lot, but I wasn't a great student, so a lot of you guys are probably in the Honor Society. I was, comma sum, barely getting out of here. But does anyone know what today is? I stumped you guys. Yes? Dave, oh, okay, good. I love the little international flair. Does anyone here search with Google? Does anyone know what's going on with Google now? Walkout Day. So this is the worldwide walkout day. My guess is Google didn't really want www to mean that, but it does. Why are they walking out? Sexual harassment, exactly. So Google, over the last couple of years, has protected sexual predators within their ranks. They have systematically hid it, according to what the New York Times and others have allegedly, so I don't get sued. But this is all coming about. They had disclosed that they gave one guy a $90 million settlement back in 2014. There was another guy that was at Alphabet X, which is, I think, their rocket company. They have so many companies. He resigned last week, didn't get a severance package, but alleged sexual harassment. I mean, is this an example of a good ethos? I mean, Google's ethos is don't be evil. Yet, that seems kind of evil. Again, the people, the men that they protected allegedly during this whole thing, were highly productive engineering types that built Android, that built rockets. But the end does not justify the means. You can't have a culture like that. It will eat you up inside. It will disintegrate. And you see a lot of talent, they leave. I mean, does anyone know who James Gilmore or Blandmore? Have you heard of the Google memo? Everyone heard of the Google memo? Where that one male engineer said, well, the reason why there's not a lot of female engineers is because they're just not meant to be in engineering. And I don't know, in this room there's probably 25% women that are engineers, maybe even a little more. Now, they say that his analysis was valid based on social science and everything, and okay, maybe that's valid, but that does not mean that the individual, the people sitting here, have that stereotype. And that's one of the things that's really important. When you make these generalizations about who is what and why just because you're a certain different thing, that doesn't matter. It's who you are as an individual. It's the individual inside you. You have the power to not be a jerk. You have the power to inspire people. And clearly you have the power to be an engineer or whatever you want to be. And as we talk more about the ethos and why I put it forth, it's because I wanted to put forth something that was going to elevate. I didn't want to put forth, okay, this is the minimum. Like, that's never good enough. The minimum's never good enough. So today is Worldwide Walkout Day for Google. If you, I don't know how you'd be in solidarity with them. I guess don't do a Google search today. Maybe go to DuckDuckGo. If you guys have never heard of DuckDuckGo. So one of the things that's really powerful about a community is that a community should regulate itself. And I love this quote because I'm a big fan of Jocko. He's an author, retired Navy SEAL. And the thing that's really powerful about this is that you can say all you want, but it's what you tolerate that matters. So if you say, oh, we're inclusive and all these sort of things, and then you're not inclusive, well, you're tolerating things, shows that you're full of shit. Now, that may seem an extreme case, but really the important thing is that a culture, especially a creative, entrepreneurial culture, like we live in Silicon Valley. I mean, the reason why I came to San Jose State and got the job I got was because we're in Silicon Valley. My dad wanted me to work at United Airlines and doing what he did, which was fix plane stuff. I don't know. I mean, I'm like, Dad, I'm in Silicon Valley. There's a startup within 5 miles here I could get a job at. But we as a community and as a culture, if we don't want to be jerks and if we don't want to proliferate jerks, we can't tolerate jerks, even if they are the most genius people that we know. And when you guys get out in industry, you will meet the genius jerk, what Bob Sutton over at Stanford calls an asshole, and you will be like, how do I deal with this? And your management, since they're engineering types, will be like, oh, they're productive, just keep on doing your work. Can't tolerate that. Can't tolerate that at all. So one of the greatest examples of this about how a culture can corrupt and how you can't be different in your personal life and your professional life is, does anyone know what this is from? It's an old movie, I know. I'm sure you know who the guy in the middle is. Tiger Blood guy, Charlie Sheen. Yeah, this was him in his heyday when he wasn't drinking Tiger Blood or whatever he did. That's Martin Sheen. That's his dad, his real life dad. And in the movie, that's his dad. And that's Michael Douglas. Gordon Gekko, Wall Street. Greed is good, right? Greed is not good. This is a perfect example, if you watch this movie, about how this young guy, who's poor, working class family, his dad actually is a shop steward at an airline, another airline reference, how he gets corrupted because he wants money. And in the end, what happens is he gets thrown in jail. Because you can't show up. You can't say to your dad, hey, Dad, I'm a good guy, and then you go to work and you're really not being a good guy. So there will be a lot of temptation to do the expedient thing, to do the thing that it seems a little shady, but we're going to do it anyway, because we got to move fast and break things, which everyone in Silicon Valley says. It never pays off. Because eventually, you will either drink yourself to death because you're so, hollow inside, and when you have the dark night of your soul, when you're sitting there going, why did I get where I am? Or you'll get caught, and no one will want to work with you. Because your reputation in a community proliferates faster than anything you can think of. And if you don't believe that, there's Glassdoor, there's LinkedIn, people can find you on, nowadays even more. Back when the internet, like at the dawn of time, which was when I got out of school, was barely the internet, you couldn't find anything on anyone. Now, I could probably within 30 minutes find anything I wanted about you guys, because you're probably all on social media, you probably all got all these profiles, and if you're down in, New Orleans during Mardi Gras, sipping on a daiquiri, going, woohoo, yay, I'm probably going to find that too, which is fine, but people can find out who you really are. So be who you really are. Don't be two people. Be one person. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about the entrepreneur ethos, because I wanted to give you some kind of concrete things to do. Now, of course, you all could buy the book on Amazon, which is available, and I really appreciate that. And you could also write awesome reviews, because we're all alumni and we all love each other, which is cool. But I kind of want to earn it. So I'm going to earn it by telling you something about ethos and ethics. So in my mind, ethos is always greater than ethics. And the reason is ethics is the minimum, that minimum bar. Now, if you guys are all lawyers, which you're not, thank God. Not that I don't like lawyers, but I only like mine. I wish I had more lawyer jokes. I got to get more lawyer jokes. Ethics is the minimum bar in which you have to adhere to. It's like the equivalent of, well, is it legal? That doesn't mean it's ethical or means it's at the top, right? But it's like the minimum. Ethos is the peak. It's the maximum. It's what you aspire to. It's all those first people I showed you. I want to be more like that. Those are the people that are at the top of the top. All of us need to aspire to that. That's why it's hard to have an ethos to adhere to, but it's inspirational, is what I'm trying to say. So ethics, minimum, ethos, maximum. And so what I'm going to go through now is basically the 5 tenets of the entrepreneur ethos. First one is failure is an option, but never the end result. A lot of times, especially nowadays, I'm sure a lot of you are really pressured to succeed. No failure. Oh, I want to go to a startup and I'm going to be a billionaire. Well, if you want to be in the entrepreneur game, you're nuts. You're crazy. Because you will not get rich. So, I'll give you a statistic. Does anyone know the percentage of college football players that make it to the NFL? 1.6%. Do you know how many of those college players that make it to the NFL score a touchdown? Well, half of them are defense, okay. It's going to be elite. Come on, we're all math people here. Well, I think hopefully we self-selected engineering because we know a little bit of math. There's a great mug where it says, I'm an engineer, spell different ways. It says, I'm just good at math because I'm really bad at spelling. Does anyone know? 0.001%, right? So, do you know what the percentage of companies that become unicorns? You know what a unicorn is, right? Worth $1 billion. It's around 1%. So your odds of hitting a startup are the same odds of making it to the NFL. Right? It's pretty shitty odds, man. If you wanted to be a millionaire, go work at Google. Well, maybe not today. Go work at Lyft. Right? So you know, this is the thing. I've been at 6 startups, okay? One of them exited for $750 million. I didn't get much of that. That's why I'm here. No, I'd be in the Caribbean. I didn't get much of that. That's 1 in 6 that was successful. I've been doing this for over 20 years. That's great odds for me. Usually it's 1 in 10, 1 in 20. But the beautiful thing about what you do, if you want to be an entrepreneur, is that as an engineering type person, you have the skills to create products, which is awesome. But unlike the NFL, you have multiple shots on goal. Well, actually, that's a different metaphor. You have multiple ways to get a touchdown, right? Because you can do one startup after one startup after one startup. But those startups that you hop around from are all going to fail. So if 1% are unicorns, 1 out of 10 actually make it, that means, 90% of every startup that's going to be out is going to fail. And you have to be okay with that. And I love the rocket analogy because of Elon Musk, SpaceX. They're so dialed into failure that when one of their rockets explodes, it's a unexpected catastrophic disassembly. And I'm like, well, the thing just blew up, right? But that's so cool. I don't know if you ever saw the video when the thing landed on the little platform and then it blew up. I don't know about you, but it took 5 times for it blowing up. That's never the end result, right? It's pretty awesome. Number 2 is integrity. We talked a little bit about that, but your own personal integrity is the only thing that you have other than the skills that you have. But having integrity means doing the right thing always, even when someone's not looking, as Coach Wooden said. It's a hard thing to do sometimes, especially when you're in a culture that shoves it under the rug. I'm sure there's a lot of people, again, allegedly at Google, that saw this stuff going on and are like, oh, we got to do something. They just didn't know what to do. Even though that's a culture that's like, we don't want to be evil. Now they're working through it, and I hope that they'll be stronger for it. 500 Startups is stronger for it. But again, this integrity thing is important. Does anyone know who this is? Are there any heavy metal music fans in the group, in the audience? Probably not. I sort of grew up with this guy. You ever heard of the song, We're Not Gonna Take It? Have you heard of Twisted Sister? The anthem? Yeah, one guy, all right. There's always one metalhead in the audience. Do you know what Mr. Snyder's doing? He's testifying in front of Congress. Do you know what he's testifying in front of Congress about? Has anyone heard of Al Gore? Has anyone ever heard of Tipper Gore, his wife? Has anyone ever bought you guys probably don't buy CDs anymore, so. Has anyone ever seen the little parent advisory warning on a CD? That's Tipper Gore. Back when this was going on, she got that to happen. And Dee Snider testified in front of Congress because her group said that his music was Satan worshiping and he's a drug addict and blah, 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 blah. He looks like a drug addict. He looks like a slime ball, huh? But if you just look at him, you wouldn't know this. Doesn't drink and is a devout Christian. Has never done drugs. Doesn't sing about drugs. They just assumed. So what did he do? He spoke the truth. And he got up respectfully in front of all these senators and said, you are wrong. This is not cool. Not a lot of people would do that. Not a lot of people would stand up, looking like him, and do that. That shows one, it shows a lot of integrity, but 2, he's looking for the truth. The truth is the best way to go. Because, you guys are all engineers. The numbers are the numbers, right? You can't make it up. Theranos, unfortunately, made that stuff up. But engineers know, the numbers are the numbers, right? It's called the laws of physics. I can bend them, but I can't break them, right? And that's the beautiful thing about being an engineer. It's there's an answer most of the time. Another thing we were talking about, when I said, okay, 1% of startups become unicorns, which means your probability of being a super rich person, like, name your favorite billionaire, super low. You got to enjoy what you're doing. Like, if you're not every day enjoying it, you're gonna, your soul's gonna be crushed. There are times in the 6 startups that I've been at where I've had to fire people, I've had to tell them I'm not gonna pay them, we've had to close down offices, we'd have to tell customers we gotta give them back their money, all hard things. But there is just nothing in the world like the freedom and autonomy to create things. The whole reason why I don't work at corporate jobs. Because 1, I don't like bad corporate coffee, and 2, I'm unmanageable. Literally unmanageable. Well, not all the time. But the journey has to be your reward. And again, if you are driven by the material wealth of startup or anything, that's not the journey you want to be on. You'll never get it. I mean, y'all are good at math. Do the math. 1%'s bad odds. 10% worse odds, bad as well. So the other thing that I really adhere to every day, and part of the reason why I'm here speaking with you, and I, again, appreciate, College of Engineering and San Jose State for having me back. It means a lot to me to come and speak, because one of the things that I've realized is that you have to share. So if you've gone down in the belly of the beast and slayed the dragon to capture the gold, you should bring the gold back and tell people what you found, if you survive. And so far, I've survived somewhat. But one of the things that I really try to tell all the people that I know is that this is an honor to be an entrepreneur. It's an honor to do and create things, because most of the time the world's against you. Google didn't invent search. They perfected it. Napster didn't invent file sharing, but now Spotify and all those things are going on. But it is an honor that we must earn every day. And the reason it's an honor is because society has said, you go figure out how to build stuff that we're going to want to make the world better. And that's an awesome responsibility. So before I end, I was going to ask if there's any questions that you guys may have. I know there's some complexity or some challenges please at least ask one question.
Yeah, if you raise your hand, we have microphones on both sides.
It can
of
be
the
on
room.
anything. It can be on how not to get scraped in jiu-jitsu. I've almost learned that. Or it can be about anything we've talked about. It could be about what it was like at San Jose State, back in the old days when the internet was just starting to come about. We had to have dial-up modems and stuff. There's a question from the front. Thank you.
Great talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Perhaps you can at least not respond, but reflect on, we engineers are educated to thinking that there is an answer, and it's a closed-form solution. And a lot of what you're talking about and my experience with life is everything is open-ended.
To a certain degree, yeah. To a certain degree.
Or we deal with a lot of open-ended things.
Yeah.
How can we shift our mindset
Yeah.
from assuming everything has a definite answer to learning how to deal with multitudes of potential answers?
Yeah.
And then how do we go about making an ethical choice?
Yeah. No, that's actually a really insightful question. So I had a hard time with this as a young engineer, because although physics is physics and there's an answer, really in the context of companies and life, as you mentioned, sometimes things get a little gray and squishy. So the way I always approach it is I have guardrails. And my guardrails are the things that I will not cross the line on. Within the guardrails is where I have to make decisions. So as an example, one of the guardrails from an ethical point of view is that I treat everyone the way they want to be treated and the way I want to be treated, which means I don't care where you're from. As long as we're interacting, I'm going to treat you with respect. I will not cross that line. Now, if someone disrespects me, well, then we have to talk about it. I'm 6'1", 210, and I've got a scar on my nose, so not that I say violence is the answer, but I can be a pretty scary-looking guy. But I try not to be, and when that guardrail is really important, especially for an engineer. Because there's going to be certain times where a boss will say, just ship it anyway, even though it's got all these bugs in it. And it's software, no worry. And you're like, I just don't feel comfortable with that. But there's a certain part of you that's like, well, yeah, you know what? We probably should get this in the wild to test it. Because I don't know what I don't know. So that's one guardrail. So the squishiness of life, I have guardrails. And I think even though there is no single answer, the singularity of the world, that like black and white, there are some things that are black and white, and the things that aren't have guardrails. Another guardrail that I try to personally do is I want to spend more time. I won't compromise my free time. So you guys are young, so there's going to be a huge incentive to work 15, 16-hour days and the work-life balance stuff, and you're kind of like, well, what does that mean? Well, when you're young, you got to learn stuff, potentially. So if you're okay with working hard to learn to get up to speed, then you should be okay with that. But my guardrail is like, no, man, my free time is worth $10,000 an hour. If you can break that, then yeah, pay me 10 grand, I'll do whatever you want. Nah, I'm just kidding. But those are the other guardrails. So I have guardrails because I think I do think that you have to have those guidelines. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second. Another question, yes.
So you've been in many startups. For people that actually want to work for startups, of course you can't predict whether it's going to succeed or fail, but if you have multiple options, how would you actually make a decision? Like how would you kind of judge or look at it, and choose which one's better? What would you look at?
I always look for the team. My most important thing is the team.
Okay.
Are these the kind of people I want to be associated with and work with?
Would you take the product into perspective, things like that?
No. Teams first. There's team, and then there's the timing. Are they in the right place at the right time? And then the third one's the technology. Because technology, anyone can build stuff. It's actually the hardest part, just so you guys know. It's not building it, it's selling it. So even though you guys may build the best thing in the world, and I guarantee you, as engineers, you are going to polish the turd until it's perfect, the hardest part is you go try selling it. And you'll have a new appreciation for the wacko marketing guy. You're like, what do you guys do? Like, well, we sell this stuff so that you can eat your top ramen or your whatever. Hopefully you don't have to eat top ramen by then. But yeah, I would say the team is the most important, because what's going to happen, like if it's a technology play, they're going to pivot. And the sooner you can recognize that you're going down the wrong path, the better. And a good team will be like, yep, this is a dead end. We got to go do something else. And if, I was actually at a startup, when I first got out of San Jose State, it was a neural network chip company, and went public, and then Intel, everyone knows who Intel is, came up with something a little similar and crushed our chip sales, and then the team's like, oh, we're going to pivot to software. And this was software back in 98. Software in 98, 97 was like, you guys still use compilers like assembly? Probably don't even do assembly anymore, right? Like, who cares, right? That's what we were talking. The company had no idea how to do software, and it went out of business. So, great question, though. Another one. Okay, back there and back here.
So, two questions relating to the team.
Yeah.
One is that how did you find in your initial startup that you started, how did you find your team members?
Uh-huh.
And the other is there anything you could have learned at San Jose State that may have helped you in looking back, that may have helped you with launching your first startup?
So the startup that I went to, I didn't launch myself. It was already established, and I found out about it because my lab partner at San Jose State worked there. And he was an older guy. Sorry, Jim. A little bit older than me. And he started out as a technician and worked his way up to an engineer. And they're like, well, maybe you should go to school, get an engineering degree. You're pretty smart. So he went to school, and he happens to plop into my lab. And he's like, we're doing stuff, and he was really busy, so I did most of the lab stuff. Again, sorry, Jim. And then he's like, hey, you're pretty good at this. Why don't you come work for me? I'm like, okay, sure, I'll do that. And so that's how I got the job there. And so, but what I learned at San Jose State, which is really valuable, and in you know, a lot of the like Ivy League schools don't really do this. It's the practical application of engineering. I mean, in my mind, there's two types of engineers. There's the kind of the professor, the scientist, and the mechanic. And so the scientist wants to figure out how everything works, and the mechanic just wants to get it done. And what I learned at San Jose State was just get it done. It's okay to understand it, but when you're on a deadline, working is better than, well, why does it do this? Ship it, right? So that was the one thing that I really appreciated. Get it done. I think we have time for, one or two more questions.
So if you're an entrepreneur and you want to hire people, how can you make sure that your hiring decisions like fit your company ethos and that the people that you interview don't just pretend to be a nice coworker?
Wow, that's insightful too. These are great questions. I'm so glad I came. So there's a bunch of things that that we, like my founding team, and I've been with them, the Lab Sensor Solutions folks, I've been at 3 other startups. So we sort of know like each other pretty well. For us, we don't necessarily care about your technical prowess. We care about how you fit into our work culture. And that's pretty easy to find out. There's actually an interesting study. They were trying to figure out how to find narcissists. You guys know what narcissists are, right? And they're like, we're going to do this 100-question thing and, you know, all this complicated thing. And then one guy's like, well, why don't we just ask them? Turns out if you ask a narcissist if they're a narcissist, they say, yeah, I'm a narcissist. So that's kind of a blunt instrument, but you can kind of tell if someone's not going to fit your culture. And one way is that if they always use I instead of we. Nothing ever happens in an I. I know there's no I in team, but there's me in team. But that's a really powerful thing. And the other thing is that typically you can vet them through friends of friends. Now, you guys are young in your career, so you may not be able to do that. But a lot of times, I mean, since everyone's connected, you can kind of figure out, like, oh, yeah, they're not. If you trust someone, you're like, hey, what do you think about them? They're like, oh, yeah, don't touch that. Oh, yeah, he's a good guy. Make sure, or good gal. Make sure you get them. But I've hired bad people, too. It's not perfect science. But the one thing I have learned is if you do hire someone bad, fire them quick. Never fired someone too soon. That's because it's toxic. Again, you know, we were talking about being a jerk and the culture. One of the most important things is building a good culture around that. And one bad apple, man, just everyone gets impacted. That woman engineer from Uber I mentioned, she was in the software QA department, I think. In that particular group, I think they had actually, I think it was 25, 30% female. And like, oh, wow, like the managers, you know. But he was a jerk, like a real jerk. And over time, it went down to just her. So there was like 10 women, and it went down to like 1. And she's like, I got to get out of here. And they're like, they wouldn't let her go. They're like, no, we got to keep you here. And she's like, this guy is, no. And kind of people know. People know. Another, actually, the best way to do it is if you have a receptionist, ask the receptionist what they think. Because most times, a jerk will treat people lower than them worse. And that's just a red flag all around. Because if they're treating them bad, who knows what they're saying behind your back. I hope that was a good one. Very, very astute. I'm so glad that San Jose State's putting out fantastically smart engineers. That's awesome.
We have one last one right here.
Wonderful.
So I saw in your talk that you you refer to CEOs as jerks pretty often, and like with a lot of power, they can be a lot of like pride, a lot of ego.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is, how do you keep yourself humble? How do you keep yourself from thinking that you're better than everyone else, even if your job title says like otherwise?
Practice Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and get your face smashed in. It's incredibly humbling because the guy that did this wasn't that big. He's not a jerk. He was an accident. So being humble and hungry is something I tell a lot of people. And the thing is when you're in a position of power, you're in the bubble. So really no one's going to tell you the right thing. And they're always going to like stroke your ego. And the thing you always got to remember is that, one, it's probably not, like people are probably not telling you the truth because they either fear you, if you have that kind of ego, or you've put yourself in the bubble. So I mean, we're in the Bay Area, right? Like we're in a bubble too. I don't know, anyone here from the Midwest? One person's from the Midwest. If you go to the Midwest, it's a lot different. I mean, I am so thankful looking out amongst you that the color of the UN rainbow is represented. If I was in, Kansas, this would be guys like me, tall white guys like me. But you get put in a little isolation, partly because people may not want to tell you the truth, but partly because you believe your own hype. And so the one thing that you constantly have to battle is don't believe your own hype. Go look at things that you don't understand, like fail, ask, be more honest, ask for more input, and be ready to take it. A lot of times people just don't want to hear the criticism. And there's a lot of CEOs that aren't jerks, by the way. But yeah, it's hard. I mean, who doesn't want to get their ego stroked? Who doesn't want to be awesome? Who doesn't want to give a talk in front of engineering students at San Jose State? How awesome is that, you know what I mean? I mean, it gets a little ego, but there's a healthy balance. So if you have good people around you, they will knock you down. Like the founders in my group, oh man, I get on a rant, they just cut me down. Stop it, you're being difficult. So thank you for that question. So yeah, let's wrap up real quick. So what I wanted to leave you with is, okay, what are some of the things that you guys can do now? The first one is have a solid why, and the why is internal to you, has nothing to do with the external world. For example, why did you want to be an engineer? What's the reason? Why do you want to do a startup? It should never be fame, fortune, and prestige, because that's fleeting. Strive for perfect effort. Remember we talked about failure? Well, you're going to fail, but if you put out perfect effort, eventually you will succeed. And this is in anyone that's an athlete knows this. Because sometimes you're doing an athletic endeavor and sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but you still keep on going. Because it's the totality of everything you've done that matters. It's on average, I've done better. Be of service, so help people out. It's amazing what opportunities that opens up to you. This is my third time speaking at San Jose State. Never thought I'd be on the stage like this, right? It's great, because hey, I want to come and talk to you guys. This is awesome. And then someone talked about those guardrails, this one's even more important, is be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Life is uncomfortable. Life is full sometimes of tragedy. Right? I've had a lot in my life over the last couple of years. And the thing that I've always realized is that, one, it's not personal, and two, I just got to do the best I can. But I have to be comfortable with that. A lot of you, again, engineers, it's going to be do this, I'm going to do this in my career, whatever. You never know. Your company could go out of business, and you're looking for a job. And then the final one, which is I think the most important, is if you want to see change in a culture and a society, be the change you want to see. Sometimes that's difficult. When I first gave this talk in 2017, the Me Too movement was just getting started, 2016, 2017. And there was a woman in the audience, and she's like, well, what happens if you lose your job? What happens if, you can say that because you're a tall white guy. What about me? And this is what had happened was there was this one person in the virtual reality space, this one engineering guy, one luminary, was sexually harassing people. And she happened to have been sexually harassed by this guy. So what's going to happen? And I'm like, whoa, I'm on your side. I'm trying to be the change I want to see. And now look what happens. Now look at the Me Too movement. It's accelerated. People are now starting to pay attention. So one final thought before we get going, and that is a great quote by Margaret Mead, which I really believe. It doesn't take a lot of people to do this. The people in this room could be the change that they want to see. So with that, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I know it's midterm, so give you guys a round of applause. Thank you.